Order. Order in the grand chamber. I slammed my ceremonial staff against the crystalline floor, sending ripples of light cascading through the massive circular chamber. The assembled representatives of 57 galactic species gradually quieted their varied forms of vocal protest. Some ceased their bioluminescent flashing, others retracted their anger-swollen appendages, and a few even stopped their ritualistic stomping. Finally, as High Councilor Vex'thor of the Galactic Confederation, I had presided over countless emergency sessions, but none quite like this. The human problem had reached a breaking point. Again, for the third time this solar rotation. Because apparently that's what humans do best: create problems. Honorable representatives, I began, my secondary breathing sacs pulsing with carefully measured breaths. We are gathered here today to address the latest incident involving our newest provisional members, the humans of Earth. Trade Minister Cax Bloodwing, his crimson feathers bristling, rose from his perch. Incident? Incident? They turned an entire asteroid into a weapon. A weapon. Point of order, I interrupted. Fighting the urge to roll all three of my eyes, they turned an asteroid into a mining facility. The fact that it could theoretically be used as a kinetic weapon is exactly the problem, Cax screeched, his warrior heritage showing through his diplomatic veneer. The irony of a Bloodwing calling another species violent was not lost on me, but I kept that particular observation to myself. Ambassador Riley O'Connor, the human representative, stood calmly at her podium. Her lack of tentacles, feathers, or even basic chromatophores made her expressions frustratingly difficult to read. The Hawking-Morrison deep space mining platform is a purely commercial venture. Its engines are for orbital correction only. Engines that could send it hurling toward any of our worlds. Council member Lyra Seven's synthetic voice modulator crackled with artificial indignation. Oh yes, O'Connor replied, her tone dripping with what humans called sarcasm, because obviously the best way to make friends in the galactic community is to throw rocks at them. We learned that one in kindergarten. The chamber erupted again. Several photosynthians began stress blooming, filling the air with their anxiety spores. The quantum collective representatives started quantum entangling and agitation, which always gave me a headache. Enough, I brought order again, though I noticed my staff had cracked slightly. Wonderful. We cannot ignore the pattern. The humans have demonstrated concerning behaviors since their admission to the Confederation. Their history is rife with conflict. Their entertainment glorifies violence. They turned their own moon into a military installation before they even achieved faster than light travel. That's a tourist destination now, O'Connor muttered. The point remains, I continued, that humanity's predilection for turning everything into a potential weapon must be addressed. The recent activation of the mining platform's engines, regardless of intent, has caused panic throughout 3 sectors. As if on cue, my personal quantum communicator chimed. The message that appeared before me froze my core temperature regulators. I read it 3 times, not quite believing what I was seeing. High Councilor Ambassador O'Connor must have noticed my change in coloration. Is everything all right? I looked up at the assembled representatives, then back at the message. Sometimes the universe has a savage sense of timing. This meeting's focus has just changed, I announced grimly. We have a situation that may require violent solutions. And as much as it pains me to say this, we might need humanity's expertise in that department after all. Looking back now, our first contact with humans was a comedy of errors that nearly ended in tragedy. Naturally. Because humans. Our scout ship detected their primitive radio signals first. The content? A worldwide sports competition they called the Olympics. Our cultural analysts spent 3 months convinced humans ritualistically fought to the death every 4 years. The betting pools among our crew were substantial. When we finally decrypted their entertainment broadcasts, things got worse. Our lead xenopsychologist had to take a mental health leave after watching something called Independence Day. Can you blame her? Imagine thinking you're about to make first contact, only to watch countless fictional versions of yourself getting punched in the face by something called Will Smith. But I digress. The actual first contact occurred when one of their orbital satellites collided with our cloaked observation vessel. The humans, displaying their trademark mix of reckless courage and bizarre innovation, sent up a rescue mission thinking it was one of their own devices malfunctioning. Captain Sandra Rodriguez and her crew of the ISS recovery vehicle Tenacity found themselves face to face with a damaged Confederation scout ship instead. Their reaction? They offered to help with repairs, then asked if we wanted coffee. The Confederation Security Council spent weeks analyzing that coffee offering. Was it a peace gesture? A show of dominance? A chemical weapon? Turns out it was just coffee. Though, given its effects on various alien physiologies, maybe it was a chemical weapon after all. Our subsequent deep dive into human history triggered 17 separate security alerts. The humans had spent most of their recorded history fighting over resources, territory, beliefs, economic systems. Sometimes just because they were bored, as far as we could tell. They'd developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet before they'd even achieved reliable spaceflight. But that's all in the past, they said. We've evolved, they said. Then we discovered their military capabilities. Trade Minister Cax Bloodwing still refuses to believe the humans developed projectile weapons using depleted nuclear waste just because they thought it would be cool. The Quantum Collective required 3 days of processing time to understand why humans strapped themselves into devices called fighter jets instead of using sensible remote-controlled drones. And don't get me started on their Space Force. Why do your ships have manual controls, we asked. In case the computers fail, they said. Why do they have armor, we asked. In case the shields fail, they replied. Why do they have physical ammunition? In case the energy weapons fail. Sensing a pattern? Humans plan for failure by adding more points of potential failure. It's maddening, it's inefficient. And it works. The diplomatic relations were even more challenging. Ambassador Jerome Williams caused an interstellar incident by gifting the Photosynthian delegation a bouquet of cut flowers. How were we supposed to know giving them a bunch of severed plant reproductive organs would be offensive? He asked. Fair point, but it took weeks to calm them down. Then there was the infamous meeting where the human delegation couldn't stop laughing at the gravitational singularity beings. Apparently, their translator rendered the species name as Black Hole Bob. They apologized profusely. But you try maintaining diplomatic dignity when someone can't stop giggling every time you speak. Most concerning was their response to our standard threat assessment scenarios. We presented them with various diplomatic crises, testing their problem-solving approaches. What would you do if a hostile fleet appeared in your solar system, we asked. Try to talk first, they said. Reasonable. And if they attacked? Hit them so hard their ancestors would feel it. That response triggered another security alert. Yet despite all this, despite their history of violence, their baffling military doctrines, and their diplomatic uniqueness, humanity surprised us. They maintained peace. They followed Confederation laws. They even helped mediate disputes between other species, though their solutions often involved something called pizza diplomacy. We were just starting to relax our guard when they began converting asteroids into mining platforms, with engines. And now? Well, now we face a crisis that might prove whether humanity's violent nature is a curse or a blessing. The message I received during that council meeting? It changes everything. And maybe, just maybe, it will change how we view humans forever. If we survive long enough to reflect on it, that an asteroid cluster I projected the sensor data for all council members to see. No, that doesn't do it justice. A swarm, a horde. Imagine taking every moon in this sector, shattering them into pieces, and hurling them straight at our most populated systems. The council chamber fell silent. Even Trade Minister Cax stopped preening his feathers. The Drachnid expanse will be hit first, I continued, highlighting the projected path. Followed by the Photosynthian nursery worlds, the Quantum Collective's processing centers, and finally, Earth. Ambassador O'Connor stood straighter at that last part. Time until impact. 47 standard days until the first fragments reach populated space. The cluster spans too wide to evacuate all systems in its path. I paused, letting that sink in. We're looking at roughly 8 billion sentients in the direct impact zone. The quantum collective's representatives began processing probability calculations, their crystalline forms flickering rapidly. Conventional deflection methods, 2.3% chance of success. Probability of total system devastation, 97.7%. Solution not found. Solution not found. Solution not found. Solution not found. Quiet Council member Lyra 7 interrupted the recursive loop. What about the gravitational singularity beings? They could. Already tried, I cut in. Black Hole Bob and his people. Sorry, the gravitational singularity beings attempted to alter the cluster's trajectory. They barely moved it 3 degrees before exhausting themselves. 3 of them collapsed into actual black holes from the effort. The photosyntheans began stress blooming again. Great. More anxiety spores. The Drachnid fleet Cax suggested. Would be torn apart. O'Connor interjected. Look at the velocity readings. Those rocks are moving at nearly 0.1 light speed. By the time they reach the first populated systems, they'll be going even faster due to gravitational acceleration. I noticed she was studying the data with an unsettling intensity. Humans got that look when they were about to suggest something either brilliant or terrifying. Usually both. The next 6 hours devolved into increasingly desperate proposals. The Hive consciousness offered to sacrifice 3 billion drones in a massive debris clearing operation. The energy beings suggested trying to phase shift entire planets out of harm's way. Someone even proposed asking the precursors for help, assuming we could find any. The precursors are gone, I reminded them. And even if they weren't, we can't solve every crisis by hoping ancient aliens will save us. That's when O'Connor cleared her throat. The sound somehow carried more weight than all the previous panic suggestions combined. The mining platform, she said quietly. The chamber erupted. Again. The weapon, Cax screeched. She wants to use the weapon. The mining platform, O'Connor repeated, louder this time, has the most powerful engines ever constructed in known space. Engines you were all just complaining about. Engines designed to move asteroids. 1 asteroid, Lyra 7 countered. Not a cluster of. We have more than 1 platform. O'Connor pulled up her own data display. We have 37, currently classified as potential weapons by this very council. The silence that followed was different from before. This one had weight, possibility. And the other facilities humanity has been building in secret, I asked, already suspecting the answer. Not weapons. O'Connor's face showed that strange expression humans made when victory and sadness mixed. They're life pods. Massive ones. We've been preparing evacuation facilities. Because contrary to what you all think, we learned from our history. We learned to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. The cost, someone whispered. Will be astronomical. O'Connor nodded. Both in resources and lives. Moving that many platforms into position, coordinating a synchronized burn strong enough to deflect the cluster. The radiation alone from that many engines. She didn't need to finish. We all understood. The platforms would need crews. Crews that wouldn't survive. How many, I asked. 374 volunteers. Minimum. And you have these volunteers. O'Connor looked me directly in all 3 eyes. We're human, High Councilor. When have we ever backed down from a fight? The council chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. Humanity's so-called weapons of war were never meant for conquest. Commander Alexandra Stone strode into the council chamber like she was walking into a corner coffee shop, not presenting a suicide mission to the galaxy's most powerful beings. Her uniform bore the patches of both Earth Space Command and the Confederation fleet, a reminder of humanity's dual allegiances. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, she began, bringing up a holographic display that filled the chamber. Let me show you how we're going to save 8 billion lives. The display showed the 37 mining platforms, represented as blue dots, arranged in a complex 3-dimensional pattern. Basic physics, Stone continued. When you can't stop something big, you divide it into smaller, manageable pieces. We're going to split that asteroid cluster like a game of cosmic billiards. Trade Minister Cax ruffled his feathers. You're going to play games with our lives. No, Sir Stone's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. We're going to play games with our lives. Your people just get to watch. The display shifted, showing the platforms moving into position. First wave deploys here, and here red lines traced their trajectories. Their job is to fracture the cluster into 7 main groups. Dangerous, but straightforward. Second wave. More platforms lit up, redirects the fragments away from populated space. The fuel requirements alone, Council Member Lyra 7 began. Our impossible Stone nodded. Correct. That's why we're not using fuel. We're going to overload the fusion drives. The chamber erupted in protests. Again, I was getting tired of that. Quiet, I commanded. Let her finish. Thank you, High Councilor Stone zoomed in on one of the platforms. Each facility's fusion drive, when pushed beyond safety limits, generates enough energy to rival a small star. For about 3 minutes. Then it explodes. Spectacularly. She paused, letting that sink in. The blast wave, combined with the gravitational forces already in play, will fragment and redirect the asteroid cluster. Our calculations show a 94% chance of saving all populated systems. The remaining 6% still saves most of them. And the crews, the question came from somewhere in the back. 374 volunteers. As Ambassador O'Connor mentioned, Stone's voice softened slightly. Each platform needs a minimal crew to manage the overload sequence. Automated systems won't cut it, the reactions are too unstable. We need human hands on the controls. To die, Cax stated flatly. To save everyone else, Stone corrected. She pressed a button, and faces appeared around the hologram. Hundreds of them. These are our volunteers. Scientists, engineers, retired military. Some are grandparents, some barely old enough to serve. All of them understand exactly what they're signing up for. I studied the faces. They looked normal. Not like heroes from epic tales. Not like warriors seeking glory. Just people. The radiation from the drives will be fatal within minutes, Stone continued clinically. The good news is the final explosion will be quick. No one suffers long. You speak of their deaths so easily, Lyra 7 observed. No, Stone's mask cracked slightly. Not easily. Never easily. But necessarily. The display shifted again, showing the projected aftermath. Safe zones marked in green. Minimal impact areas in yellow. No red zones. The council must vote, I announced. We cannot ask. You're not asking, Stone interrupted. We're telling. Those platforms you've been calling weapons. They launch in 20 hours, with or without Confederation approval. We just thought it would be polite to inform you first. The chamber, predictably, exploded with outrage. Various species began shouting about sovereignty, about regulations, about 100 other things that suddenly seemed very small. My staff cracked completely this time. Wonderful. Commander Stone, you realize this could be considered an act of war. No, High Councilor. This is an act of salvation. The only difference is whether we do it with your blessing or your condemnation. The dead won't care either way. I looked at the faces circling the room. Regular people choosing to die so others might live. The mathematics were simple. 374 lives to save 8 billion. What support do you need from the Confederation, I asked. The protests started again, but died quickly this time. Everyone knew where this was going. Evacuation ships for the outer colonies, our calculations show we can't save. Medical support for radiation cleanup. And Stone hesitated for the first time. And someone to deliver the letters. Letters. Each volunteer wrote one. To their families, their friends. Some wrote to the whole galaxy, explaining why, asking for understanding, hoping they made the right choice. The chamber fell silent again. Not the silence of shock or debate, but the silence of revelation. A photosynthean representative, petals drooping with emotion, spoke up. When we judged humans as violent, we never considered this kind of violence. The violence you do to yourselves, for others. That's humanity for you. Stone managed a small smile. We're really good at breaking things, including ourselves. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Even Trade Minister Cax raised his wing in approval. As the council dispersed to begin preparations, I accessed the volunteer list. Names, faces, stories. Caroline Chen, physicist, age 67, leaving behind 3 children and 7 grandchildren. Marcus Wong, engineer, age 23, recently engaged. Sarah Martinez, retired pilot, age 45, single mother of 2. 374 stories. 374 endings being written by choice. Commander Stone stood at the display, still studying trajectories and calculations, still trying to squeeze out a few more percentage points of success, even though the cost was already counted. A commander, I called out, "Why?" She turned, and I saw in her eyes what I'd seen in those volunteer photos. Not resignation, not despair, something else, something uniquely human. Because we can, she said simply. And if we can, we must. 20 hours passed like a quantum blink. The council chamber transformed into a command center, tracking 374 lives moving toward their end. Captain Marcus Chen's voice came through the comms, clear and steady. Platform horizon actual. All stations report. One by one, the platforms called in. 37 voices, some young, some old, some steady, some shaking, all determined. The Nova Republic sends its warships to escort you, I announced to the assembled crews, as do the Bloodwing fleets. With respect, High Councilor Chen replied, tell them to maintain safe distance. We appreciate the honor guard, but we're about to create 37 miniature suns. Anyone too close is going to have a very bad day. That was humans for you, cracking jokes on the way to their own funeral. The platforms moved into their initial positions, spreading out like a giant net waiting to catch the apocalypse. The asteroid cluster loomed in the long-range sensors, a wall of death moving at a significant fraction of light speed. First wave platforms, confirmed positions. Commander Stone's voice carried from the tactical station. She'd insisted on running operations herself. Confirm radiation protocols are disabled. There was a pause. Confirmed, came Chen's voice. We've stripped all the safeties. Environmental systems will let us feel every rad. Why? Council member Lyra 7 asked. Why not die painlessly? Because we need to feel it, another voice cut in. Lieutenant Sarah Knox, platform Starcatcher. Need to know when the radiation hits the sweet spot. Computers can't track these reactions fast enough. Human nervous system makes a better Geiger counter. That's Cax began. Insane, Knox laughed. Yeah, that's also humans for you. The next hour was filled with technical chatter. Platform crews made their final adjustments. Some sent last messages home. Others sang songs. Platform Dreamweaver's entire crew belted out something called Bohemian Rhapsody. 3 other platforms joined in. Then the cluster entered range. First wave, Chen called out. Light them up. 12 platforms fired their engines at maximum thrust. On the sensors, 12 new stars blazed to life. The crew's vital signs spiked as radiation flooded their ships. Radiation critical, someone reported through gritted teeth. Core temperature climbing. Hold. Stone's knuckles were white on the tactical console. Hold. The asteroid cluster began to break apart, fragments splitting along natural fault lines, just as planned. Then Platform Horizon's engine fluctuated. Containment's failing early. Chen's voice crackled with interference. Waves going to be too weak. Reroute power from life support, Knox called out. Give them everything. Negative, Chen shot back. You'll need full power for second wave. We'll handle it. Manually. The words hung in the air for a moment before their meaning became clear. Captain Stone warned, if you open the engine room. Already done. Chen's vitals were dropping rapidly. Teams installing secondary fusion taps directly into the core should boost output by 30%. The radiation in there is spectacular. Chen's laugh turned into a cough. But it's working. Look, Platform Horizon's energy output spiked. The other 11 platforms followed suit, their crews making similar adjustments. The asteroid cluster split perfectly into 7 massive fragments. Second wave, Stone called, her voice tight. "You're up." The remaining platforms moved into position. Many of their crews were crying now, not from fear, but from watching their friends burn. "Hey Sarah," Chen called out weakly. "Yeah, Marcus." "Me!" "Remember that date you kept turning down?" "Seriously?" "Now." "Figured I'd try one last time. Nothing left to lose, right?" Knox's laugh carried across the comms. "Tell you what, you haunt my general vicinity after this, we'll call it a date." Deal. Then Platform Horizon exploded. A miniature sun bloomed in space, its shock wave catching the largest asteroid fragment perfectly. 11 more explosions followed in rapid succession. Second wave, Knox called out. "Light them up. Make it count." 25 more fusion drives ignited. 25 more crews began to die. The remaining fragments of the cluster were deflecting, but something was wrong. The trajectories weren't matching predictions. Fragment 3 is too dense, Stone reported. It's not deflecting enough. Impact with the Drachnid system still likely. On it, Knox's voice was strained. "Starcatcher crew, prepare for rapid core overload. We're doing this hot and fast." "Sarah," wait, Stone began. "Sorry, boss. No time for better options. All remaining platforms adjust for our absence. And somebody tell my cat she's going to have to find her own damn dinner from now on." Platform Starcatcher's engine went critical in 10 seconds instead of 3 minutes. The explosion was smaller, but more focused. Fragment 3 spun off course, safety margins restored. The remaining platforms detonated one by one. Each explosion precisely calculated, each death carefully chosen, each sacrifice freely given. When the last platform blazed out of existence, the council chamber was silent. The tactical display showed the modified asteroid trajectories in green. All populated systems safe. All platforms lost. The Nova Republic ships began broadcasting a morning dirge. The Bloodwing vessels fired their plasma weapons in salute. The Photosynthians released clouds of memorial spores that would bloom for a century. 374 volunteers, Stone whispered. 375, actually. Lieutenant Knox wasn't on the original list. She took her brother's place this morning. He has 3 kids. She had a cat. I stared at the tactical display, at the 37 new stars that had blazed briefly and died to save us all. Humanity, I said slowly, has been judged wrongly. No, Stone replied. You judged us exactly right. We are violent, dangerous, capable of tremendous destruction, she smiled sadly. We just usually aim it at ourselves first. 3 days after humanity turned 37 mining platforms into funeral pyres, the Galactic Council convened again. The chamber, usually a cacophony of voices, remained hushed. The agenda contained only one item: recognition of sacrifice. The numbers are confirmed, I announced, my voice carrying across the silent chamber. 8,243,000,000 sentients saved, 0 civilian casualties, 0 populated systems impacted, the most successful defensive operation in Confederation history. Trade Minister Cax Bloodwing raised his wing. Gone was his usual aggressive posture. The radiation clouds from the explosions. They're forming nebulae. Yes, Commander, Stone replied from her position at the speaker's podium. We're calling them the Guardian Lights. They'll shine for about 1,000 years. 37 new stars, Council Member Lyra 7 observed, born from sacrifice. The Quantum Collective's representatives sparkled with a new calculation. Proposal: rename the sector. Designation: the hero's grave. No, Stone shook her head. They wouldn't want that. Name it the New Dawn Sector. They died to ensure tomorrow would come. So let's remember the tomorrow, not the dying. The motion passed unanimously. Then came the letters. 375 messages, each read aloud by a different council member. Some were brief, others rambled. Many told jokes. Captain Chen's consisted entirely of bad puns and a request that someone water his plants. Lieutenant Knox had hastily scribbled hers on a takeout menu, apologizing for the coffee stains. The photosynthians wept luminescent tears. The gravitational singularity beings pulsed with grief frequencies. Even Trade Minister Cax's feathers drooped in mourning. We called them violent, a Drachnid representative whispered. We feared they would destroy us all. We were half right, I replied. They are destroyers. But we never understood what they were willing to destroy. The Council's final act was to commission a memorial, not a statue or a plaque, but a school. The Confederation Academy of Human Sciences, dedicated to understanding the species that sacrificed 375 of their own to save billions of others. As the chamber emptied, Commander Stone approached my podium. She looked tired, aged beyond the 3 days that had passed. High Councilor, she said quietly, humanity requests permission to build new mining platforms. The chamber froze. Several representatives turned, alarm crossing their alien features. Already, I asked. There will be other threats, she replied simply. Other moments that require sacrifice. We'd rather be ready. I looked at her for a long moment. You would do this again. Every time, she smiled sadly. That's the part about humans you still don't understand. We'll always try to be better, build better, find better solutions. But when there are no good choices left, we'll make the hard one, every single time. The Council voted yes, unanimously. Because finally we understood. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their violence. It was their willingness to pay the price for peace. 10 cycles have passed since the day of New Dawn. The Guardian lights still shine, though somewhat dimmer now. Every season, ships from across the Confederation make pilgrimages to watch the nebulae dance. Humanity surprised us again. They didn't retreat into grief or isolationism. Instead, they reached out further. Their mining platforms still dot the spaceways, but now they include crews from every species. Their technology for detecting cosmic threats has been freely shared. Their sacrifice became a bridge, not a wall. Last week, I attended the graduation ceremony at the Confederation Academy of Human Sciences. The valedictorian, a young bloodwing named Chen, gave a speech about hope, about how her namesake died making bad puns and watering requests. The old trade minister, her grandfather, beamed with pride. His feathers have gone gray, but they still bristle with emotion. We no longer fear humanity's capacity for violence. We finally understand it was never their defining trait. Violence was simply the price they were willing to pay, the tool they would use against themselves to protect others. Humans call it falling on a grenade. The concept puzzled us for centuries. Now it's required reading at the Academy. Tomorrow, the Council votes on extending human emergency response protocols across the Confederation. It will pass, of course, because now we know. In a galaxy full of wonders and terrors, humanity's greatest gift wasn't their strength, their technology, or even their sacrifice.